How to understand English news. 9 techniques to help you understand English news. 1. Try to understand the news content in a language you are familiar with first. Language learning is difficult but interesting. Foreign reporters who have just arrived in China, although most of them are not bad in Chinese, sometimes the news Chinese is not strong. When translating or reading some Chinese press releases, although they can look up the vocabulary, they must fully understand the overall meaning is often somewhat difficult. In such a situation, I would suggest that they read the same piece of news in an English newspaper first, learn the ins and outs of it through their native language, and then look at the Chinese manuscript. The content that was thought to be complicated becomes much simpler. Similarly, before learning the English news of the day, learn the main international or domestic news of the day from the Chinese media. It is much easier to listen to the English news. Of course, this is during the study period. After the introductory stage, it is not necessary. 2. Master the limited vocabulary of various news English. The world is wide and there are so many incidents. Most people must think that if you want to master the relevant vocabulary of news English, I am afraid that there are thousands of words, and you have to memorize an entire news font library to understand it. This idea seems very logical, but in fact there is a huge mistake. From political news to entertainment news, of course there may be thousands of words, but related words only appear once every few months or even every few years. Fortunately, more than 85% of the words encountered in the news every day are what we call commonly used vocabulary, commonly used words. In other words, as long as you can master these 500 or 600 recurring words, that is, the vocabulary introduced in this book, you can understand more than 85% of the news. For some other more specialized news vocabulary such as finance or science, wait for the main vocabulary to meet, and then slowly increase the difficulty. 3. Don't think about something you don't understand. Keep listening. You must have an experience. When listening to English news or English programs, when you encounter a word that you don't know or a passage you don't hear clearly, you start to think about its meaning, often resulting in the following content not being heard clearly. The so-called one mind cannot be used for two purposes. You should never think about the meaning of the previous sentence while listening. It is necessary to develop a habit of not stopping to think when you encounter something you don't understand, and listen attentively. I didn't understand a certain passage. There are several possible reasons. Maybe there is a word that I haven't learned, or there is a more special sentence pattern. Maybe the broadcaster's speed has accelerated for a while, and I'm even distracted and didn't listen well. No matter what the reason is, continue listening regardless of it, or it is possible to understand the main content, because 90% of the time, missing a point will not be the key to preventing you from connecting to the meaning below. But if your mind is stuck, the previous sentence must be annihilated. 4. Don't care too much about the names of people and places. When you hear difficult names, what should I do in such a situation? Leave it alone. To be honest, when I listen to the news on BBC or CNN, I often hear the names of people or places that are not familiar to me, such as people from a certain country. Maybe I have not heard of them. It is very likely that you will ask me after listening to the news, and I can't answer. His name comes out, but most of the time it does not affect the understanding of the news. I only need to know that he is the leader of a certain country's Congress. Another example is what happened in a small town in southern Russia. It is clear that it is a small town in southern Russia, enough for me to understand the content of the news. You can also try this method. Don't be bothered by complicated names. Of course, important news figures and place names still have to be familiarized. 5. Learn at the correct speed. People often asked me to dub some English textbooks. When I entered the recording studio, I sat in front of the microphone, took the manuscript and started to read. Without reading a few words, the person in charge asked me if I could read more slowly, so I started from the beginning, slowed down, and read a few words, and he asked again, can I be slower? After the textbook was published, I listened to the cassette and thought that not only did it sound weird, it was also not helpful to the learning, because normal speech is not like this at all. Local friends often complain that the speed at which I broadcast news on ICRT is too fast for them to understand. I can only say that this is the normal speed for news broadcast. Even if ICRT broadcasts slower, wait until you want to listen to BBC or CNN. I still don't understand. What should I do? When I came to Taiwan, basic Chinese conversations were not a problem. After a long time, the newspapers could be read. However, when I opened the news of China Broadcasting Corporation or Sante, I still felt fog. So I recorded the Chinese news and repeated it. Listen. If you don't know the words, ask a friend to help you listen to them. Hear them hundreds of times until you understand them completely. Because of my own practice, listening to Chinese news now, I will not miss a word. 6. Lock in rough news content as soon as possible. Before broadcasting a certain piece of news, a self-introduction like this is very helpful for learning news English. What do you say? Let me give a simple example. So far, the Taiwanese I can understand are still limited. If you just say a few words to me, I might not understand it, but if someone first lets me know the topic he is going to talk to me, the next step is much easier for me. This situation is the same as giving you a small reminder before the news. If you know what kind of information you are about to receive, you can prepare your own thoughts first. Of course, not every news item will give you such a reminder. If not, you have to lock the content and direction as soon as possible. If you are watching TV news, you can try to understand what kind of news it is from the screen. If it is broadcast, also it should be judged from the first sentence. 7. Listen often, practice often. Maybe you think that the simple truth goes without saying, but you will find that the simplest truth is also the most important. I remember that not long after I came to Taiwan, my Chinese was not yet very fluent. I only needed to return to the United States for a few weeks. After I returned to Taiwan, I would not listen to my tongue and stammer when I started speaking Chinese. Later, I chatted with a professor of Oriental linguistics at Stanford University in the United States. He said that in fact, as long as you spend some time in contact with it every day, you can completely avoid this situation. 8. Understand the process of learning news English and the speed of progress. Learning anything, especially language, is like a snowball, getting bigger and bigger, and at a certain stage, the speed of learning will naturally speed up. In the initial stage of learning news English, you may often feel that you don't understand, but if you continue to work hard, you will unconsciously find that you are less energetic, but you can understand more. Why is understanding this process one of the tricks? Because many people think that they can't learn it before half the way, but in fact, as long as you have perseverance, you can definitely achieve very satisfying results. 9. Be confident in yourself. Someone must say that everyone knows this, but many people have no confidence or lack of confidence in themselves, and their progress and achievements in learning are greatly reduced. There is a saying in English, we are our own worst enemy. Although learning news English is not difficult at all, if you think in your heart, I definitely can't learn it. I have not yet started to fight, and I have been defeated by myself. It is more difficult to break through the psychological barriers I set up than the barriers of actual learning. I remember when I first started learning Chinese in the United States. One day I picked up a thick Chinese novel in a bookstore in New York's Chinatown. I only recognized the first 3 characters in the title of the book, read. Open it. Only a few scattered words can be recognized in it. At that time, I thought to myself, will I really understand this one day? For foreigners, it is extremely difficult to recognize Chinese characters, but I told myself at the time that I must learn it and never give up easily.